Today I'm sewing and sharing one of the McCall's patterns that I got in my most recent pattern haul. This is McCall's 8202, a square neck ruffle tank. I had just under 2 yards of this batik fabric in my stash, which was perfect to sew up view B. This is a pretty little tank, perfect for summer, with ruffles all around the front and the back. No buttons or zippers, just a cute woven top that slips right over your head. You could grab this pattern at your local fabric store, but I've also left a link for you below so that you can check out all the details and grab a copy and sew it along with me. Cut out all your pieces, mark your dots and notches, and let's get started. I will be making view B in this video, and the only extra notion that you need besides your fabric is 1/2 inch single fold bias tape. On your front main pattern piece, you have a large dot indicating your gathering points. I've transferred those markings onto my fabric. I'm going to take this to my machine and sew gathering stitches at the top of my front main pattern piece, starting from one large dot and ending at the other. I'm going to use the largest stitch on my machine, which is 5 millimeters, leave extra thread at the beginning and at the end so that I have threads to pull to gather. Stitch with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now place your front and back pieces right sides together and pin your side seams. Sew your side seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and then serge your seams to finish. Now I'm going to start applying my bias tape to my armholes. 1/2 inch single fold bias tape has 2 flaps on each inner edge that are a 1/4 inch in width. My seam allowance for the armhole is 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to open one of the flaps up on my bias tape and place the bias tape right sides together with my garment so that the raw edge of my bias tape and the raw edge of my fabric are 3/8 of an inch apart, and pin in place. And now I'm going to take this to my machine and sew my bias tape to the armhole, stitching inside this 1/4 inch crease in my bias tape from one side of the armhole all the way to the other. Now you're going to trim the seam of your fabric so that the raw edges of your fabric and bias tape are the same. Fold your bias tape to the inside of your garment, right along the seam that we created at our sewing machine. Fold it to the inside so that your other folded edge of the bias tape is tucked underneath, and pin in place. Edge stitch all along this inner fold of your bias tape from one edge to the other. And then repeat the same exact steps to finish your other armhole. Apply interfacing to one set of front and back neckbands and your front and back bands. Grab your uninterfaced front band and back band pieces and place them right sides together along the straight edge and pin in place. Do this for both sets and sew your seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And press your seams open. Place your front bands and your front neck band right sides together along the slanted edge, pin in place. We're going to sew these seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance from the bottom of the slant to the dot that you transferred from your pattern piece. You should have a dot on both sides of your pattern piece. Backstitch at the beginning of your stitches and at the dot, and press your seams open. And then place your back bands and your back neck band right sides together along the slanted edges and pin in place. And just as we did for the front neck band, you should have transferred 2 small dots from your pattern piece that indicate where you're going to stop your stitching. Stitch these seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, making sure to stop your stitching at your dots. And then press open those seams. Attach all of your front and neck band facing pieces in the same exact way. Now grab your front neck ruffle and your 2 front ruffles and place them right sides together along the slanted curves and pin. Stitch again at 5/8, stopping at your dots. And follow the same exact steps to attach your back ruffle pieces to your back neck ruffle. Now that we've connected all the pieces of our front and back ruffles, take your connected front and back ruffle pieces and place them right sides together at their slanted edges. Pin in place, sew to your dots, and press the seams open. Now that all of our ruffle pieces are all connected, we're ready to finish the entire outer edge of these ruffle pieces. I've gone ahead and pressed each outer edge along the entire interconnected pieces by 5/8 of an inch all the way around. And now I'm going to take this fold, take the outer raw edge and fold it to the crease, and then roll that one more time on the crease to create a rolled hem all the way around this entire piece, and pin in place. Once you're rolling your hem and you get to each of your pointed corners, the instructions recommend to snip off some of this fabric from the triangle by about 3/8 of an inch so that you leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance within this triangle. This will reduce some of the bulk at this corner when you're rolling your hem. Continue rolling your hem for all of your raw edges all the way around your ruffle pieces, all along the outside edges, and miter all of the corners as we've done here. Then you're going to edge stitch close to this inner fold all the way around your rolled hem. Now that our narrow hems are completed all around our ruffle pieces, we're ready to start our gathering stitches along the insides of all these pieces. So we're going to go to our machine and sew gathering stitches on each of these inner edges of our fabric, starting and stopping new gathering stitches at each of the dots that we worked with earlier. Sew with the longest stitch on your machine, making sure to leave tails on either end for pulling your stitches together. Start stitches at each of these inner corners, ending at the next inner corner, starting a new set of gathering stitches until you reach the next corner, until you've made your way all around the inner edges of this ruffle piece. Now we're going to start working on attaching our ruffles to our band pieces. So I'm going to start with my front ruffle and attach it to my front band piece. I'm going to attach the gathered edge of my ruffle to the outer edge of my front band, matching the centers and pinning. Then I'm going to gather the ruffles so that it fits within the band piece. Once it's gathered to fit, I'm going to pin it in place. Then I'm going to gather the rest of my front ruffle so that it fits the rest of my front neckband. And then continue clipping in place. And then I'm going to gather this front ruffle and attach it to this front band piece. And right sides together, pin it in place. And then do the same to gather your back ruffle to your small back band piece. And then continue working your way around to gather each ruffle piece to its corresponding band piece. Now that we've gathered and pinned all the way around, take it to your machine and baste all of your gathers in place all the way around this square. Now grab your bodice piece with the top of your back bodice right side up, and then place your back band right sides together with your back piece, sandwiching those ruffles in between, and pin in place matching your notches. And then we can pin our ruffles to the front of our bodice. Match your front ruffle with your front bodice right sides together, finding your centers and pin in place. And then begin to gather your front bodice using the gathering stitches we stitched at the beginning so that it fits this ruffled section. Pin your ruffles to your front bodice, matching your notches. And now stitch your bands to your front and your back bodice at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now fold in all of the outside edges by 5/8 of an inch and press them to the wrong side. And trim these outside seam allowances by a 1/4 of an inch. Take your front facing and flip it up, and then grab your interior facing piece and place them right sides together matching your centers, and pin in place. Continue pinning in place all around these facing pieces. And then you're going to sew these facings together all around this square with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, making a nice clean pivot at each of these stitching gaps. Now let's trim these seam allowances of our ruffled sections all the way around, as well as the seams that we just sewed to connect the facings together. This will minimize the bulk before we turn the facing to the wrong side and stitch it in place. And now you can open out that interior facing. We're going to understitch this seam all the way around. With this seam pressed up toward your interior facing, stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the original stitching line, stitching the seam to this facing. And we're going to do that all the way around. Now turn your facing to the inside of your garment so that the folded edge of this interior facing just covers our facing stitches. Poke your needle through that folded edge of your interior facing so that it exits the front of your dress right inside of this ruffle seam, and pin in place all the way around. And now that your interior facing is pinned all the way around this lower fold, we're going to stitch in the ditch from the outside ruffle seam, periodically checking underneath that you are catching that interior fold. And do this all around the entire facing. And now the very last step is to hem the bottom of our blouse. I've gone ahead and pressed up the bottom of my hem 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to do a rolled hem just as I did for the bottom of the ruffle. Edge stitch close to the inner fold of your rolled hem all the way around, and you are all done with your blouse. Thank you so much for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration, and I'll see you in the next video.